Troy is burning. Bronze flashes through streets, homes fill with smoke, and soldiers drag families from the ruins. Inside the conquered city stands the woman history will blame for everything. Helen of Sparta, Helen of Troy, the face said to have launched 1,000 ships. But the oldest stories give us something more disturbing than that slogan. A woman watching a war fought in her name, while kings claim the glory. Was she abducted, willing, or coerced by a goddess? The Greeks never agreed. Their uncertainty is where Helen's real story begins in the flames. Before Troy, Helen was a Spartan princess, daughter of Zeus and Leda, famous before she could control fame. Kings and warriors sought her hand. Her beauty became dangerous political power that might unite kingdoms or tear them apart. Her mortal father, Tyndareus, feared that choosing one suitor would turn the others into enemies. In later tradition, Odysseus proposed a solution. Every suitor would swear to defend Helen's eventual husband against anyone who violated the marriage. Helen was given to Menelaus, who became king in Sparta beside her. The oath was designed to prevent bloodshed. Instead, it created machinery for war. If Helen were taken, every disappointed suitor would be bound to fight for the man who had won her. The pattern was already clear. Helen stood at the center, but the decisive actions belonged to fathers, husbands, and kings who transformed a woman's marriage into an alliance backed by force. Across the Aegean, Paris was a prince of Troy. His famous judgment belongs to wider epic tradition, not a complete surviving account by Homer. At the wedding of Peleus and Thetis, poets said, the goddesses Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite competed to be declared the most beautiful. Paris became their judge. Hera offered power. Athena offered victory and wisdom. Aphrodite offered the most beautiful woman alive. Paris deliberately chose Aphrodite. The promised woman was Helen, already married to Menelaus and absent from the bargain. No one asked what she wanted. A divine rivalry and a prince's desire had turned a living queen into a reward before she ever saw Troy. The myth would later place the war's shame upon Helen, yet its first decisive bargain was made by Paris and the gods. She did not judge the contest, make the promise, or award herself. Still, she would inherit the guilt of every choice made around her. Paris arrived at Sparta as Menelaus's guest. In Greek epic, hospitality was sacred. Betraying a host offended both household and gods. Menelaus welcomed the Trojan prince, then departed for Crete. What happened next became the question no ancient storyteller could settle. Paris left Sparta with Helen and treasure from the palace. Some traditions describe abduction. Others suggest persuasion, desire, or willing escape. Later writers imagined divine compulsion, while Euripides eventually claimed that only a phantom Helen sailed toward Troy. The familiar romance is therefore not a fact preserved intact. Even Homer's Helen remembers following Paris, yet the poem also shows Aphrodite threatening her when she refuses the goddess's command. Consent in this story is never simple, stable, or fully recoverable. At the shoreline, Helen may have seen freedom, terror, desire, or all three at once. The sources do not let us enter her mind. When Menelaus returned, his wife, wealth, and honor were gone. Whatever Helen had chosen, powerful men would decide what her departure meant, and what thousands of others must pay for it. Menelaus turned to his brother Agamemnon, an Achaean king. The oath was called in. Messengers crossed the kingdoms, summoning rulers who once competed for Helen and were expected to recover her. Not everyone rushed toward glory. Later tradition remembers Odysseus pretending madness and Achilles being hidden from recruiters. Such stories reveal what heroic language conceals. War demanded husbands, sons, and fathers who suspected many would never return. At Aulis, the fleet gathered, but hostile winds held it in port. In one famous tragic version, Agamemnon sacrificed his daughter Iphigenia so the ships could sail. Before a Trojan died, the campaign associated with Helen had already consumed a Greek girl. Then the horizon filled with sails. The expedition was called Rescue, Punishment, and Defense of Sworn Honor. It also offered status, plunder, command, and fame. Helen was the reason spoken aloud. She was not the only reason the fleet crossed the sea, and every day the kings continued the war became another choice of their own. The Iliad does not introduce Helen as a triumphant seductress. She sits inside Troy weaving a great crimson war cloth, stitching into it battles suffered for her sake. The war's supposed cause records its pain. She climbs to the Scaean gate, where elderly King Priam asks her to identify the commanders below. Helen names Agamemnon, Odysseus, and Ajax, men from her former world. She searches for her brothers, unaware that they are already dead far from Troy. Helen wishes she had died rather than leave her home, child, and companions. She condemns herself more harshly than Priam does. The Trojan king tells her that he blames the gods, not her, for the war. Then the poem makes her captivity darker. After Menelaus defeats Paris in single combat, Aphrodite rescues Paris and orders Helen to his room. Helen refuses and mocks his cowardice. Aphrodite threatens her with destruction. Only then does she obey. The goddess of love does not offer romance. She enforces it. Helen's beauty has become a prison guarded by divine power, public shame, and two armies waiting below. The war soon becomes larger than the woman invoked to justify it. Hector leaves Andromache and their infant son to defend a city he knows may fall. Their farewell contains no dream of possessing Helen, only fear that wife and child will be enslaved. In the Achaean camp, Achilles withdraws because Agamemnon seizes Briseis, a captive woman awarded as a prize. The Iliad's central quarrel mirrors Helen's world. Powerful men measure honor through control of women, while entire communities absorb the cost. Patroclus dies. Achilles returns in grief and kills Hector. Vengeance now drives the story more fiercely than marriage, and funeral fires burn on both sides of the plain. Helen recedes while pride, loyalty, rage, and the memory of the dead keep the armies fighting. The poem itself covers only weeks in the final year, and its deepest conflict is Achilles' anger, not Helen's desire. By then, she is no longer the engine of war. She is its explanation, and explanations survive because they make complicated violence feel simple. The Iliad ends before Troy falls, but epic tradition carries the city toward destruction. Paris dies, and Helen is given to his brother Deiphobus, another marriage decided around her. The Achaeans build the wooden horse and hide warriors inside. In the Odyssey, Helen circles the horse, imitating the voices of the hidden men's wives, nearly making them answer. Was she testing the trap, helping Troy, or compelled? The poem leaves a contradiction beside stories in which she secretly aids the Greeks. That night, the gates open. Warriors emerge, the fleet returns, and Troy burns. Priam is killed. Houses and temples provide no safety. The victory promised as Helen's recovery becomes a massacre. Trojan women are divided among the victors as spoils. Andromache loses Hector and is assigned to Achilles' son. Later tragedy has the child Astyanax hurled from the walls so he cannot grow into an avenger. People who made no oath, judged no goddess, and sailed in no stolen ship pay the final price. A war said to restore one woman ends by destroying the freedom of many others. Menelaus finds Helen in ruined Troy. In later Greek dramatic tradition, he approaches with a sword to punish her, yet beauty, memory, or uncertainty stays his hand. The Odyssey instead shows Helen later, queen beside Menelaus in Sparta. Is she rescued, reclaimed, forgiven, or simply transferred once more? Homer offers no trial that resolves the question. In Sparta, Helen recognizes Telemachus, recounts memories of Troy, and mixes an Egyptian drug that quiets grief. Husband and wife remember the war differently, surrounded by ghosts they cannot dismiss. Other writers refused the standard story altogether. Herodotus argued that Egypt's king detained Helen while Paris sailed to Troy without her. The Trojans could not return a woman they did not possess. Euripides went further. His play Helen sends the real woman to Egypt, while a phantom goes to Troy. These versions do not prove Helen's innocence. They expose the instability of her guilt. Every age created the Helen it needed: adulteress, abductee, victim, traitor, phantom, survivor. She escaped Troy, but never escaped the judgment built from her name. Archaeology shows that Troy was a real, layered city at Hissarlik, and that destruction reached it more than once. It cannot prove a 10-year siege, a wooden horse, or the life of Helen. What survives is literature, beautiful, contradictory, and shaped by societies arguing about desire, power, and blame. Perhaps Helen left willingly. Perhaps she was abducted. Perhaps divine coercion was the ancient language for pressures the poets could not otherwise explain. Her silence became the space where later ages placed their fears. The honest answer is uncertainty. What is clear is that Paris violated a household, kings mobilized armies, commanders prolonged the campaign, and warriors pursued honor and plunder. Calling Helen the cause compresses all those choices into one woman's face. Troy still burns in memory, and Helen still stands in its light. Not the woman who caused a 10-year war, but the woman upon whom a 10-year war was blamed.